Have you ever just looked at someone and thought, what on earth are they doing? I mean, seriously, why would you do that? It's a question we all ask ourselves, right? Well, today we're going to dig into some of the most common, but also the most baffling human behaviors.
You know, it could be that colleague who's just wildly overconfident, or a friend who suddenly goes completely silent on you. Maybe it's someone you know who just never seems to leave the house. These things can feel super frustrating, right? Even confusing, or you might take it personally. But what if there's a whole lot more going on just under the surface?
All right, so let's get right into it. We're going to look past the surface level stuff and explore the real psychological drivers behind these behaviors. And here's the key. We're not talking about character flaws. We're talking about predictable patterns in how our minds work, how they protect themselves, and how they manage energy. It's fascinating stuff.
First up, let's talk about something we all do, thinking. And this isn't about how smart someone is, not at all. It's about these common traps in our thinking that can affect literally anyone. These are the hidden patterns that really shape how we see the world and even ourselves.
Okay, a huge one, and you've probably seen this in action, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. So what is it? It basically explains why, sometimes, the least competent person in the room is also the most confident. And get this, they're not necessarily lying or trying to be arrogant. It's that their very lack of skill literally makes them blind to their own mistakes. That confidence becomes like a shield that stops them from ever learning.
Now this slide is really interesting because it breaks down two totally different ways our brains can process things. On one side, you've got emotional reasoning. This is where your feelings are the judge, jury, and executioner. If it feels bad, it must be wrong. It makes you just reject any information that's challenging. But on the other side, you've got logical processing, which is all about asking, okay, but is there any evidence for this? This split is absolutely crucial for understanding why some conversations just go completely off the rails.
And it doesn't stop there, of course. There are a bunch of other common traps we fall into, like taking everything super literally, completely missing sarcasm or the bigger picture. Or how about making the same mistakes over and over because you just can't connect the cause with the effect? And a big one, blaming everything and everyone else for your failures. Your boss, bad luck, the system. It feels good for the ego, sure, but it completely kills any chance of actually growing.
And that really brings us to this key idea, perfectly captured in this quote: "The mind that never doubts itself never learns." Think about that. Real growth, real learning, it doesn't come from being certain all the time. It comes from being willing to question yourself, to sit with that discomfort of not knowing everything.
Okay, so we've talked about what's going on inside our heads. Now let's shift gears and see how that plays out in our relationships. We've all been there, right? A friend, a family member, they just go quiet. They stop reaching out. And man, it can feel like a direct punch to the gut, like a personal rejection. But psychology shows us it's almost never that simple.
A lot of the time, it all starts with this, an effort imbalance. This chart shows it perfectly. If you're the one who's always making the calls, always sending the texts, always setting up the plans, your brain starts to notice. And after a while, that effort stops feeling like a connection and starts feeling like a chore.
And that imbalance leads right into this powerful psychological reaction. When that communication feels totally one-sided, pulling back isn't an attack, it's not aggressive. Silence actually becomes a way to get that sense of fairness back, to restore some emotional balance. It's purely a protective move.
And you gotta understand, this kind of detachment isn't like flipping a switch. It's a slow burn, a gradual process. It starts small. First, you stop sharing the personal stuff, what's really going on with you. Then, you stop being the one to reach out first. And finally, you stop expecting to hear from them at all. By the time the silence is super obvious to the other person, the emotional connection might have already been fading for a while. And there can be other things going on too. Sometimes, going quiet is just a way to guard yourself against a bunch of small, repeated disappointments. You just get tired of it. Other times, it's almost like a little experiment. You go quiet to see who actually cares enough to reach out. And of course, when life gets stressful and you're mentally overloaded, cutting back on social effort is one of the first things people do to conserve energy. All right, for our last section, let's tackle behavior that gets a lot of judgment. The person who rarely leaves the house. It's so easy to just slap a label on them, right? Lazy, antisocial. But the psychology behind it is way more complex. It's really all about managing their internal world and their energy. This slide just nails the misunderstanding perfectly. On one hand, you have the common judgment. They're lazy. But the psychological reality?
It could be high sensory sensitivity. We might think, oh, they're antisocial, but really, it's often a deep need for psychological safety, for a space where they feel in control. It's not about avoiding people entirely, it's about being incredibly selective with their precious energy. Because going out has a very real energy cost, and this chart breaks it down so well. For some people, believe it or not, the biggest drain isn't even the social interaction itself. Look at that big slice. It's the sheer amount of external stimulation. The noise, the lights, the crowds, the traffic, it's all just too much. Home is the only place they can truly recharge their nervous system.
And this is often tied to a trait called high sensory sensitivity. All this means is that their brain processes everything, sights, sounds, even emotions, way more deeply. So an environment that feels totally normal, maybe even fun and exciting to you, can feel genuinely exhausting and completely overwhelming to them.
And this is such a brilliant point. It's often not anxiety about being out that's the problem. It's something psychologists call activation resistance. Basically, it's the friction of just getting started. The massive mental effort it takes just to get ready, get organized, and walk out the door, that's the real mountain to climb.
So after looking at all these different behaviors, what's the common thread here? What ties it all together?
Well, it's all about making that journey from a quick, surface-level judgment to a much deeper, more empathetic understanding.
So let's just recap the big shifts in perspective, right? We see someone who's overconfident, but now we know it might just be a cognitive blind spot, like the Dunning-Kruger effect. We feel rejected when someone goes silent, but it could really be about their own emotional self-protection. And we might judge someone as lazy for staying home, when in reality, they're just trying to manage intense sensory overload.
So here's the bottom line. What looks like a negative personality trait, something we're quick to judge, so often has hidden roots. It's all tied to these fundamental things: the way we think, the unconscious tricks we use to protect our feelings, and the very real ways we have to manage our limited mental and sensory energy.
And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. Now that you have this new lens, which of these patterns do you see a little differently? Maybe not just in the people around you, but maybe, just maybe, in yourself too.